So the purpose of the Teen Think Tank project is to empower teenagers by not only giving them a voice, but the tools and resources they need to flourish and make a positive impact in society.
One of the things that stood out to me right from the beginning was the amount of team building we did, as in getting to know our fellow research associates and becoming familiar in order to maximize our working strategies. For example, we started with the Belbin team role assessments and communication style assessments in order to really grasp what our communication styles are like and be able to work efficiently based on our preferences.
So for academic development, one of the very important things now that I'm getting ready to go off to college, I'm a senior in high school, is learning how to do real academic research. I feel in schools, they tell you to write a research paper and put it in MLA format, and you're not really given any feedback on it, besides the grade that you get at the end, and it's okay, let's move on to the next topic. Here at the Teen Think Tank Project, they really drilled that into our heads, how you conduct real research, the tedious process that is editing your research paper. I'm taking dual enrollment classes at a local college, and I was just recently working on a research paper, and my professor said, has anybody written like an actual research paper? And it was kind of cool to be in a class with people who are freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and even seniors in college who didn't raise their hand, but I was the senior in high school who raised their hand because I wrote a real research paper.
And what I'll share with you, from the perspective of the, being a parent to these kids that are, in high school. And I'll speak to Samir first, who's my current 12th grader. He is, eyeball deep in college applications, and the opportunity this has provided to differentiate himself, to stretch his thinking, his leadership, to come across in a college essay or a college interview as somebody that's working on something from, essentially side by side with Matt and Kelly from the ground up, figuring it out as you go, leading as you go, having access to experts, in these industries, being comfortable communicating. You get more than your traditional experience.
Administration. So the stuff you guys are learning, I didn't really dive into that until I was a master's student. So I commend you all for that.
And I'm looking forward to each one of you somehow contributing in huge, big ways. Your generation, it's where it's at.
So one of the things that we're looking to do is it's a 12-week program. 12-week program. We're about 3 weeks into it now. But in late March, early April, we're going to publish content. We're going to publish policy work that says, this is what we found. This is what we understand to be relevant. This is what we want to see happen. We'll share that with you. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Please do. So you're a real think tank.
We are a real think tank.
Wonderful.
A real think tank.
There's a quote that said, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify, vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. You have to have, in terms of striving for this type of, you have to have a little insanity and craziness in you, because most of the people are not willing to take these types of risks. We have to train ourselves. They said, they've done studies, if you want to lose weight, and you're overweight, hang around somebody that's in shape. If you're not smart, hang around a smart person. So if you want to be moral, hang around a person that's moral. If you want to be an activist, hang around activists. Why? Because there's a lifestyle that's associated with that. There's a language that's associated with that. And the more you're around these types of people, it rubs off. You get some of that. So whatever work you're trying to do, if I'm trying to be an NBA basketball player and you're trying to be a botanist, I'm not saying we can't coexist, we can't have dialogue. But if you're hanging with me, I'm spending so much time on the court, you're not going to be great as a botanist.
So that voice that you heard is Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, former NBA All-Star and social justice activist. And more importantly, he's a friend of the Teen Think Tank Project. And his message is quite simple. It's whatever you aspire to be, whatever your goal in life, hang with those who have that same goal. Hang with who you want to be. So if you want to hang with teen change agents, if you want to support future leaders, if you want to learn a little something about the high potential high school students that are going to solve the social problems that they're going to inherit from the previous generation, well, you're in the right place, because that's what we do here at the Teen Think Tank Project. My name is Matt DeSantis. I am the co-founder of the Teen Think Tank Project, and on behalf of Erica Friedhoff, Bernadette Sheehan, the Teen Think Tank Project staff, and the Winter Change Agent Academy, I'd like to welcome you to the 2024 Financial Security Policy Launch Party. We call this event a party, not a webinar, not a presentation. We do that because we want to celebrate the teen change agents who have spent 500 combined hours, have penned 17,000 words and 66 pages of research, put together a 90-minute presentation, all in an attempt to solve a problem they didn't even create. They are here, they are committed, and they are about to show you how the future leaders of America, how the future generations of change agents are going to tackle financial security and economic equality in America, something that they are all very passionate about, but more important, all very cognizant of. So over the next 80 or so minutes, you will not only learn about financial security and economic equality, but you're going to learn about these high potential teen change agents who spent the last 3 months working with me, Erica, subject matter experts, and most importantly, working with each other to create a policy framework that we will reveal tonight. Just a couple bookkeeping issues that we'd like to cover before handing it over to the real stars of the evening. Everything that you see tonight will be available on teenthinktankproject.com. I will drop that link in the webinar chat. So if you have to leave early or you're coming late, you will be able to access this presentation in full on demand on our website. In addition, this is interactive. We will have a question and answer period toward the end of our time together. If you could enter your questions in the Q&A function, not the chat, that'll help us try to get to as many of those as we can. And most importantly, please know that the future of our society is being represented here tonight. These are not only future leaders. They are not only future change agents. They are it. They are the real deal. They are making things happen today. They are developing solutions to problems that exist in real time. So as you listen to them, as you absorb the materials that they present, do so with the fact in mind that this is not a theoretical exercise. These are real change agents solving real problems. And with that said, I'd like to hand it over to that group. Team, take it away.
Hello, hi, and welcome to our research launch party. We are beyond excited to have you here. We've been working for months and we cannot wait to share our thoughts with you. Without further ado, let's get right into it. We've prepared a research question that summarizes our learning objectives throughout the last couple of months. We continuously asked trained professionals, fellow researchers, and thought leaders, what are the economic, social, and legal impediments that are preventing meaningful and substantial reform when it comes to achieving economic equality and financial stability for all Americans?
Thank you, James. Like he said, we want to look at the economic, social, and legal perspectives. And we here at the Teen Think Tank Project did this by dividing ourselves into 3 distinct cohorts. Firstly, the economic cohort, starring myself, Harsha Ahmed, Keely, McAteer, and James Parlee, who you just heard. Next, we have the social cohort that works on the social aspects behind financial instability, with Lara, Mahani, Mattos, Srinidhi, Suvarapu, and Lily Shu. Finally, we have the legal cohort, which deals with the legal reforms that could be taken. This consists of Diego del Castillo, Matthew Lerch, Mahi Jaladi, and Quin Barengolts Spear.
Okay. Thank you, James and Harsha. Now let's put those names to faces and get to know each research associate a little better before diving into the rest of the presentation. Matt, if you could pull up the video, please.
My name is Mahi and I'm a freshman in New Jersey.
My name is Quin Spear. I live in Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Lily Shu and I'm a junior in New Jersey.
I'm Lara. I'm a junior.
Hi, I'm Matthew.
My name is Keely.
I'm Harsha Ahmed.
My name's James.
I joined the Teen Think Tank Project to use my voice to advocate for awareness surrounding financial instability.
Because I believed it would offer a valuable opportunity to explore this issue of financial insecurity.
And I joined this cohort to really learn about all the factors that go into poverty.
I want to improve my writing skills.
To step out of my comfort zone.
I want to be a change agent.
To become a better researcher.
I joined the Teen Think Tank Project so I could help be a change agent to make a difference in the world.
Thank you, Lily. So now you've met all of our researchers, let's move on and look at how we as a cohort function. So starting off with the Teen Think Tank process, firstly, we identify and send out applications to high potential students, as we like to call them, and we select these high potential students to be tomorrow's leaders. We then work with the cohorts who have been chosen semi-weekly over the course of 3 months to work on leadership and research. Finally, we culminate the achievements of the cohort in a webinar where you're at right now.
Thank you, Harsha. Our values are integrity, accountability, and intelligence. We need to be honest with each other for our work. We need to be accountable for our work, and we need to be intelligent, and so that we can have deep conversations about important topics. Now Keely will tell you about our motivations.
In joining this cohort, we were motivated by our desire to learn, but also to become problem solvers in the world we live in. Witnessing financial inequities firsthand has moved us to stimulate change. Our country was built on the foundation of the American dream that said it was possible for people to be able to pull themselves out of poverty. And we hope that through the skills that we developed and the paper that we produced, we can work towards building a more hopeful and more sustainable future. And I think some of my fellow research associates will explain our process a little further.
Thank you, Keely. Financial stability is dependent on a variety of economic factors that tie in with social and legal factors as well. A major player in this is education, namely financial literacy. Firstly, what is financial literacy? Financial literacy is defined as the ability to grasp financial concepts ranging from taxation to budgeting. It is primarily the responsibility of parents, with 82% of parents agreeing that they must provide financial literacy from a young age to their children. Schools, as traditional learning centers, are also often looked upon for financial literacy, and the internet is a new rising source of quick and free online resources. However, only 50% of states mandate financial literacy as a course for high school, And within the 25 states that do, financial literacy is often included as a part of another course, not as a separate graduation requirement. As a result of this, only 1/3, or 33% of all Americans are financially literate, which can be attributed to a lack of curriculum, behavioral economics, and social phenomena. Firstly, the high school curriculum in a majority of states either does not consist of a financial literacy requirement or does not have a detailed and comprehensive course related to it, which leads to students not learning essential financial skills in school. In the cases where financial literacy is offered, it is often math intensive and is therefore seen as a boring subject. Now, the obvious response to that would be to find a way to make it less boring. But the problem arises when the fact is taken into consideration that many minors, aka students, do not have practical means to put their learnings into effect. Only 45% of American students hold a job during high school, which is one of the few avenues that provides them with a practical way of handling money. A lack of financial literacy by itself causes a variety of harm to people's choices, but combined with irrational human behavior, it can lead to the nullification of financial literacy in favor of instinct. 6 in 10 Americans live paycheck to paycheck due to overspending. This can include shopping sprees, not following a budget allocation, or medical expenses, namely sudden medical expenses. These sudden payments often disrupt a restrictive budgeting system and bleed into savings, nullifying the effects of financial awareness and literacy. Another major aspect to consider is societal norms regarding the discussion of finances. Talking to someone is often seen as a great way to relieve financial stress, yet 40% of couples that do discuss finances end up fighting. The presence of societal stigma as a whole factors into individual relationships when concerned about finances. Finally, segregation due to factors like redlining contribute to divide in financial literacy resources. Regions occupied by minorities such as Asians, African Americans, and Hispanics receive on average $23 billion less in funding when compared to white communities, putting their schools at a disadvantage. This can lead to a reduction of opportunities related to financial curriculum or practical job experience. Furthermore, Black-owned businesses were among the hardest hit during the pandemic, as the CARES Act, which was passed during the COVID-19 pandemic, only gave aid to employer firms, thus excluding 95% of Black-owned businesses. So the question arises, what can be done about this? A multifaceted approach is needed that starts with school curriculum. The obvious solutions of mandating the courses in all states and making it a graduation requirement apply. But to make the subject itself appealing, here are a few practical ideas. Firstly, a class economy project where students essentially role-play a society with transactions, budgeting, and sudden expenses all factoring in. Furthermore, a non-algebraic approach can be taken into subject to promote financial awareness among those who are less math inclined. For example, inflation can be taught as a gradual rise in prices and thoroughly explained before using CPI percent change calculations. The government can also play a role by creating websites similar to Investopedia.com that provide free online financial resources. Finally, at home, parents can be encouraged to provide financial literacy to their children, and regular workshops and vocational training could be provided for the same purpose. Thank you.
As Harsha so well explained, financial literacy is an extremely important part of gaining and saving wealth. Without it, it would be very difficult for many Americans to earn and save. However, the deficits in the modern education system extend far beyond that. Studies have shown that it is nearly impossible to achieve financial success in America without a quality education. We see that 25% of people without a high school diploma are in poverty, and the average salary for someone without a high school education is around $29,000, which is over $60,000 away from the ideal $90,000 salary that researchers believe to be the absolute minimum in order for the average American family to stay afloat. Therefore, those born into areas with inadequate or underfunded school districts are immediately disadvantaged and faced with yet another obstacle in the way of escaping poverty. Studies show that active engagement in education is a key factor in academic achievement. However, engagement isn't as easy as it seems, especially in low-income areas with high rates of absenteeism. Absenteeism in high poverty communities is caused by struggles with accessing education. For example, 50% of K-8 students have to travel over 2 miles to school. And as low-income areas are often the highest in crime rates, transportation becomes a serious barrier between students and their education. And still more impediments exist within the school system itself. Over 7,000 of the American public school systems struggle with funding gaps that lead to things like low-quality curriculum, overcrowding, and inefficient teaching. Additionally, as modern society develops, research indicates that technology becomes even more important to a student's education. Yet, 56% of impoverished students struggle with slow internet connections that interfere with educational opportunities, and 59% have poor quality computers, while 28% have limited access to devices at all. Today, we know that states that have reformed their local tax policies to allocate more funding to high poverty school districts narrowed the community's educational achievement gap by 20%. Therefore, proposed solutions for these issues include the redistribution of tax dollars within school finance systems in order to prioritize fiscal equity, as well as the implementation of efficiency measures within school districts, the utilization of non-governmental funding sources, and a push towards increasing public awareness and policy initiatives. Overall, it is vital to accentuate the subtle yet critical role that a quality education plays in addressing and reducing the socioeconomic inequities in America today, and that dismantling barriers to education in low-income areas is only the first step in paving pathways for advancement. However, with that being said, education is only one of the problems that is responsible for the perpetuation of modern poverty. Because of the state of America's housing crisis, researchers have been finding that even a supportive educational environment may not be enough for workers to escape low-income areas, making housing yet another obstacle to navigate for those seeking economic advancement.
Thank you, Keely and Harsha. Citizens all over America are forced to deal with different challenges. One mountain, however, that we all have to climb is being able to afford a home. The Journal of Economic Perspectives found that between 1996 and 2016, median values of homes increased by 168% in San Francisco, 97% in Boston, and 94% in Seattle. Between 2019 and 2021, the number of suitable rental homes worsened by more than 500,000 units, according to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. This issue stems from supply and demand problems. As more and more Americans are purchasing homes or renting apartments, the supply has not been meeting the demand. The vacancy rates for rental housing units were at 6.6% in the fourth quarter of 2023, and housing vacancy rates were at 0.9% according to the U.S. Bureau Census. This is the lowest it has been since the 1980s. This indicates that people are desperate for housing and there isn't any available. This means that landlords and homeowners can lease or sell their homes and apartments for extremely high prices and remain competitive in the market. Because the cost of buying a house or renting an apartment is so high, millions of families are unable to accumulate savings and become financially stable. In 2019, 9.4 million households paid more than 50% of their income on rent, according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. The remaining 50% is then dedicated to groceries, gas, transportation, food, schooling, and other necessities, which leaves next to nothing to go towards a savings account. Low savings rates don't necessarily cause financial instability, but they do make up an adequate picture of the average American's financial status. If savings rates are low, the average American isn't financially stable. The solution to this problem is investment. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities predicts that approximately $100 billion is required to revitalize the public housing situation. With an increase in public housing, fewer people would feel the pressure to purchase their own home or rent their own apartment, allowing them to work on becoming financially stable before having to worry about the cost of housing. This would also decrease the demand for housing, which would decrease the price. Another strategy is investment in the housing vouchers. These vouchers have been invested in housing since the aftermath of World War II. Today, people who meet income requirements can apply for these government vouchers. If approved, the money will be sent directly to the property's owner, essentially splitting the cost of renting for the voucher holder. This can allow the renter to dedicate more of their income towards savings rather than housing, which could increase financial stability for the renter. The lack of funding our government has provided for the housing crisis in America has created a devastating problem that will remain without resolution for decades unless action is immediately taken. All Americans deserve to live in a home, the price of which that does not prevent savings and investment. If this problem is not solved, financial stability will remain out of reach for millions of Americans, as the housing crisis is a direct contributor to financial stability in America. There are many economic boundaries that Americans are forced to overcome if they want to achieve financial stability. Some impediments, however, are not economic.
Thank you to Harsha, Keely, and James for their work. Now, along with economic impediments, there also lie social impediments that influence financial stability. These social impediments include systemic racism, social norms, and gender roles. I'll be talking about the first key social impediment, which is systemic racism. Okay, so systemic racism is the outcome of institutionalized racial discrimination within a societal structure. This means that institutionalized laws like slavery and the 1830 Indian Removal Act, which forced Native Americans out of their traditional land, ingrained many discriminatory mindsets into Americans until it became common to think that POCs, or people of color, were inherently less than non-POCs. These laws have left deep scars to POC communities as they continue to face discrimination even today. So, systemic racism can be found in two important factors to financial stability. One, banking systems, and two, education systems. Firstly, let's address the banking system and more specifically, systemic racism in loans. Subprime mortgage loans, which are loans that have higher interest rates and are given to individuals that lenders deem are high risk, are more often to be given to POC families even when they qualify for better mortgages with better benefits, which are called prime loans. This is a problem because mortgage lenders may be influenced by their human biases and prejudices when they distribute loans, which perpetuates the effect of systemic racism and places POCs at an automatic disadvantage. Subprime loans consequently land POCs in more debt as they struggle to pay back those higher interest rates, which leads to financial instability. The systemic racism in loans also affects one's quality of education. As POCs struggle to repay their debts from mortgages, many resort to living in poorer neighborhoods, so their mortgages and property taxes are cheaper. Lower property taxes consequently lead to a poorer public education system because public education relies on property taxes for funding. A good example of the impacts of systemic racism on public education is the comparison between the Bronx and Manhattan. So the Bronx, which is the poorest borough in New York, is 44% Black and 50% Latino, and struggles with acquiring adequate technology, teaching, and education services. In contrast, Manhattan, which is over 40% white and is the richest borough, enjoys high-level education. So the POCs in the Bronx can't receive the same education as white people in Manhattan, which then limits their chances at higher paying jobs and therefore perpetuates financial instability in POCs once again. Therefore, both the banking and education systems of America have to go through reform. Diversifying banking systems in predominantly POC neighborhoods would allow them to choose their own adventure in dealing with savings accounts, interest rates, and more. Secondly, an automated loan system would also get rid of any inherent human biases that's a result of systemic racism. Finally, creating increased education opportunities for oppressed groups would allow them to gain equal footing for more privileged families. Working with charities and nonprofits like the Education Trust would give students more experiences, which would essentially spice up their college resume and open up more pathways for higher education. These solutions could combat the effects of systemic racism. However, while systemic racism is a large factor to financial instability, many other social impediments create an even more complex argument surrounding the issue of financial stability.
Like Lily was saying, there are a lot of things ingrained in the system that contribute to poverty, such as social norms, which have been developed over thousands of years and are interwoven in our society. There are unwritten rules regarding actions, beliefs, and attitudes, and which ones are and aren't socially acceptable. And American society has very defined standards of what success would look like. Generally speaking, when we think of successful individuals, we do not think of tattoos, dark skin, African American vernacular English, worn-out clothes, mental illness, foreign accents, names from other cultures, or disabilities. We can see this when we look at the concept of professional attire, which has a great impact on one's ability to gain employment and thus one's ability to gain financial stability. Many employers would be less likely to hire a candidate with facial tattoos. This has a substantial effect on quite a few communities, but especially on Indigenous communities, as Indigenous groups have used tattooing for many sacred practices. So when it comes to workplace discrimination, racism is certainly not a new concept. The role racism plays in everyday life can be seen in the doll study. In 1946, many children were shown plastic baby dolls, identical except for skin color, and asked which doll they preferred. 62% of the children, including Black children, preferred the white dolls. But how one looks is not the only impediment to receiving fair and just treatment in our society. How one speaks or sounds also has a tremendous impact on one's experiences. African American vernacular English is a dialect of the English language and is often not treated as seriously as others. We see this in the trial of George Zimmerman for the murder of Trayvon Martin, where Martin's friend, Rachel Chantel, heard everything that happened before the murder, but her testimony was thrown out by a nearly all-white jury because they found her, and I quote, not credible due to her speaking African American vernacular English. When we look at job discrimination, we see that African American vernacular English speakers are paid 12% less than others. And discrimination against African American vernacular English carries over to the workforce. Even names just associated with African American culture can affect one's chance of securing a job. Researchers Martin Abel and Rudolf Berger conducted an experiment where they found that employers were 30% more likely to hire candidates whose names were associated with white Americans. They also found that employers were 50% more likely to give a call back to an applicant when they had a stereotypical white name. While there is a great deal of attention that is paid to the biases in physical appearance that lead to financial instability, the marginalization of mental health plays a significant role in creating the barriers to economic equality that many Americans face. More than 1 in 3 workers wouldn't seek mental health help out of fear of job consequences, and about half of all workers in the United States are afraid to discuss mental health concerns in the workplace. When looking at all of these together, many of them are linked to colonization, and over time we have continued to cling to these social norms for a false sense of security, and letting go of social norms can feel like letting go of that security. Once you realize how these norms can affect your life and the life of others, there are many ways to cope with the feeling of uncertainty that comes with it. Therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy and reactive emotional behavior therapy work very well for this scenario. CBT works on the premise that environmental triggers aren't the only thing that can upset a person, and how they perceive their problems also plays a substantial role. Rational emotive behavioral therapy is similar to cognitive behavioral therapy, but has different focuses. For example, it focuses more on the premise of that somebody's still being worthy of acceptance and respect, even if they are struggling. And these norms, it's important to remember that while they can reassure some people, they cause catastrophic consequences for most. Whether or not a world without social norms is even possible, it's clear we need change. That being said, change cannot happen until we all take a look at ourselves and everybody bears responsibility to do so.
Hi everyone. Adding on to what my associates said, another implication that leads to financial insecurity is gender disparity. One, gender disparity is defined as differences in women's and men's access to resources, status, and well-being through various different institutions and primarily social norms. Throughout the history of the United States, there have long been inequalities in access to resources, opportunities, and more based on gender. In the 19th and 20th century, various laws have made it difficult for women to have their voices heard in a public setting. For example, women were only nationally granted the right to vote in 1921 after decades of work by various women's rights suffragists such as Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And although this level of gender disparity has definitely alleviated over the past century, gender bias continues to be displayed in various fields and economic situations. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, there is still a jarring gender wage gap in many fields, and women are paid approximately 84% as much as men, which is almost $10,000 difference per year. And because of this, financial stability and economic insecurity disproportionately affects women in comparison to men. Throughout the history of gender disparity and the wage gap, we can see that from ancient Greece to Victorian England to even modern day, there has always been some undertones of misogyny in our society. And in the 19th and 20th century, throughout the numerous waves of feminism, women have gained the right to vote and have gotten socioeconomic freedom, but oftentimes social norms and the gender wage gap was still predominant because the jobs that women could get in the 20th century were primarily segregated occupations, such as jobs that were considered nurturing, such as nursing or teaching. Additionally, because the income made by women wasn't considered part of family wages, many unions and minimum wage advocates didn't really take into account the rights of women in the workforce, which still leads to gender disparity in today. And in modern day, even though so many improvements have been made, studies show that in many fields, especially STEM, there is still a jarringly high entry-level salary for a male candidate in comparison to a female candidate. And there is shown that there is almost a $4,000 difference with the same comparable credentials. This links the wage gap to self-efficacy because the gender wage gap leads to reduced levels of self-efficacy in women in comparison to men, because in STEM fields there is often a sense of imposter syndrome, and this leads to social norms pushing for women to be more dismissive of their ideas or discount their opinions and focus of the views and opinions of others. But although this is a very impactful topic, there are still so many solutions that can be implemented. So we must look for a variety of solutions that address the problem from multiple perspectives. One main solution is advocacy for wage transparency. Wage transparency is the practice of revealing your wages to other employees, associates, future employers, and more. And according to various studies, there is still a stigma against doing this. But by advocating for wage transparency, we can push for a culture of openness and trust, which makes it easier for people to advocate for themselves. Additionally, another solution is promotion of better role models, because as imposter syndrome starts from a young age in many societies and cultures, especially for little girls trying to enter the STEM field, because STEM is predominantly a male-dominated field. So it's very important for schools and educational organizations to promote female role models in various different fields in order to reduce this level of imposter syndrome. Studies actually show that children who were associated to a role model from a young age felt more confident in what they were doing as they grew older. Therefore, it's very important to implement both of these solutions in order to work towards change that we all wish we could see. With that being said, I would like to pass it on to the rest of my associates who have so much more to say.
Thank you, Srinidhi. As well as the social impediments, there's also a variety of legal impediments that lead to financial instability. And today I'll be talking about the impact of labor practices on financial stability. So just for a quick background, over the last few centuries, America has made remarkable progress in the world of labor laws. A couple hundred years ago, during the Gilded Age, there was a rise of big business, and this came with unfair labor practices towards the working class. It wasn't uncommon to see things like child labor, extremely uncleanly and dangerous factories, and workers frequently working 10 to 14-hour days and making extremely low amounts of money. Eventually, because of this discrimination, their labor reform movements emerged, and most of them shut down unfair labor practices because they sought for more competitive wages and advocated for an 8-hour workday. So because of the gradual protections passed by the government, most of the unfair labor practices were shut down, but some still remain in America. One regulation that's heavily debated is the minimum wage standard. This standard, while it's intended to ensure that everyone makes a fair wage, the system has flaws, and a lot of people argue that minimum wage levels are too low, especially in specific areas, to provide adequate financial security, especially in areas with high costs of living. Another one would be overtime regulations. While they are designed to compensate employees for working beyond the standard hours, they often fail to address the financial needs of low-wage workers sufficiently. Whether it is that they don't get paid for the overtime hours, whether the overtime hours aren't clocked, or whether they get paid the same amount as they do for their normal hours, it affects a lot of people. Overall, to combat economic inequality in America, these issues have to be addressed. Whether it's adjusting the minimum wage by small amounts in certain areas or by a national standpoint, it needs to happen so that workers can make a living wage, and also to enforce worker protections when it comes to overtime pay, which would ensure that people are paid sufficiently for their hours worked. So who is affected? Like Srinidhi talked about, women, especially women of color and other minorities, are often discriminated against in the workplace, making them encounter higher rates of joblessness, discrimination, underemployment, which pushes them to the economic margins, which leaves them no other choice but to take any job that they can get, which is often a very low-paying job, if not a minimum wage job. Another group that's heavily affected by this are immigrant workers, especially those without legal status, because those people are often exploited by their employers. They're subject to unsafe environments, poor working conditions, wage theft, and unpaid overtime because they can't speak up or seek abuse help because of their fear of deportation. So a Sin and Ortega study actually says that on average, the hourly wages of undocumented workers are 42% lower than the wages of US-born workers and legal immigrants. Another group would be young and old workers alike. A common conception is that a lot of young people, like high school and college graduates, have very low paying jobs, but it's not always just them. There's a study that says, an Escrow and Cooper study, that says 88% of workers affected by changes to the minimum wage are at least 20 years old, and 33% of which are at least 40 years old. So this goes to show how sometimes not even years of experience in a certain job will raise your income. So let's talk about the negative impact of these practices. Obviously, low wages impact the financial security of specific marginalized groups. And this manifests in several different ways. A lot of the time there's building up debt, bad housing situations, and limited access to loans. A lot of low-wage workers struggle with debt because they're forced to take out loans for utilities, healthcare, rent, or other common expenses because they don't make enough money to live comfortably. A lot of these people are forced to resort to high-interest loans or credit cards to cover basic needs, which just creates this cycle of debt that undermines their financial stability. So, overtime. Workers often work overtime for two different reasons. First, they try to embrace the opportunity to make more money because they're making low wages and they want to make more. And also because these low-wage jobs have little job security, employees feel obligated to accept these assignments to secure their positions and to not get fired. However, sometimes they fail to realize that their benefits are not always enforced. A 2021 survey by Stein found that 1 in 5 middle and lower class workers are not being paid for overtime commanded by their employers. So not only are these workers being taken advantage of, but they're also not getting compensated for their work. So this lack of sufficient, consistent, and fair wages causes people to struggle to pay basic living expenses like rent and utilities, and they also, with that, have little to no other time for other responsibilities or other job opportunities because they spend all their time working overtime, which just creates this constant cycle. So solutions of this, like any social problem, there's not any one-size-fits-all solution. We have to examine each individual impediment in regards to the global issue. One of which is advocating for an increased minimum wage. One crucial step for this is to advocate for policies that ensure fair wages to all workers, including raising the minimum wage to a level that reflects the actual cost of living. Even a raise as little as $1 hourly in certain places can close a gap to almost $2,000 yearly. In Pennsylvania, in 2024, the minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour, which means if they worked every single day for 8 hours a day, they would make $21,000, leaving them with almost no money after average rent pay for other necessities, groceries and healthcare and utilities and things like that. Another solution would be regulating and reducing working exploitation. A lot of these, the workers that are exploited through their overtime, it's not because always of the employer, but a lot of the time also because the employee is not educated on their own rights. So we should enforce more robust enforcement mechanisms to ensure that they're compensated fairly for all their hours worked and to help protect them from exploitation. It's essential to establish these clear guidelines for tracking their work hours and overtime publicly, and that this could also involve providing employees with easy-to-use timekeeping systems and requiring these employers to review and verify these records regularly. Just educating employers and employees about their own rights would also help. Finally, affordable initiatives. Two of the most expensive costs of an American's life are healthcare and housing. So investing in affordable housing initiatives and expanding access to affordable healthcare can alleviate these financial burdens a lot and just overall improve the economic stability of these marginalized workers. Targeted government subsidies and incentives for constructing low-income housing developments can directly address the pressing need for affordable housing as well. Also, expanding Medicaid coverage and implementing measures to lower healthcare costs, like regulating prescription drug prices and increasing funding for community health centers, can significantly alleviate financial strain on low-income individuals and families. Specifically for families, a large cost is childcare. And with that, I'll pass it on to Matthew.
Thank you, Diego. My name is Matthew, and my project is on the policy impediment of childcare. So childcare is very important to American society, as it enables parents to stay in the workforce while ensuring the welfare of their children. Throughout the last century, childcare has made great strides within American society. During the Great Depression, many support systems emerged, like the New Deal's Emergency Nursery Schools program, which provided 1,900 daycares to 43 states, so mothers could work instead of taking care of their children. And later on throughout the century, new childcare subsidies would emerge, like the Child Independent Care Tax Credit and the Child Care and Development Block Grant. Despite these advancements, many families living in poverty continue to face challenges with access to childcare resources and inadequate benefits from support systems, pushing low-income families further into poverty. So to deal with these high and rising costs of childcare, many government subsidies have emerged. The most significant of these programs is the Child Independent Care Tax Credit, a non-refundable tax that reimburses a portion of childcare costs for working parents with kids under 13. However, this subsidy has many flaws, and it usually ends up providing insufficient care or benefits the wrong demographics. So the most considerable average benefits for this credit were received by families with annual incomes between $100,000 and $200,000. And this is likely due to the first flaw, the absence of an income cap for eligibility. Although higher income families receive less support, they still use up some of the funding that could go towards the families that need it. The second flaw is that it's a non-refundable tax credit. So high income families often benefit from this tax credit because they have a higher tax liability. When they use the credit, it will not fully cover their taxes, but they will receive the full use of the credit. But lower income families have lower tax liabilities, so the credit will fully cover their taxes, but leave excess credit that cannot be refunded. Families also struggle with the accessibility of childcare. Childcare deserts, which are areas with a scarcity of childcare resources, contribute to the inaccessibility of affordable childcare. While the Childcare Development Block Grant provides federal funds for states to combat the issues with childcare deserts, the funding for this program is highly inadequate, as approximately 51% of people in the US live in childcare deserts. This leads to fewer mothers in the paid labor force, as more mothers have to stay home and provide for their children with no daycare availability. This is where family paid leave could play a significant role in providing support for these families. Although the US is the only high-income country that does not provide mandatory paid parental leave. As of 2023, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, only about 27% of US civilian workers have access to maternity leave. If a mother does not have access to paid maternity leave, the family will barely be able to cover the financial burden of taking care of a child. And even if someone is fortunate to have access, the Federal Employee Paid Leave Act offers eligible employees only 12 weeks of paid leave. The policy provides some early assistance for mothers. However, such a short duration of time will lead to the same economic challenges as someone without access to maternity leave. So how do we address these issues? The high cost of childcare can be addressed by making the Child Independent Care Tax Credit a fully refundable tax credit and concentrating the benefits on families with the lowest income. These families can allocate the credit towards their taxes, and if it's refundable, the leftover money can be redeemed and put toward other costs after covering their taxes. Additionally, if concentrated on families within the low to middle class, this could centralize the funding to just a tiny demographic, increasing the amount received from subsidies. To address the issues of childcare deserts, the accessibility of childcare resources needs to expand through increased funding of the Childcare Development Block Grant. This increase in funding could facilitate the creation of more daycare facilities, especially in areas where the accessibility is very sparse. Also, the increase in funding would allow subsidy programs to allocate larger subsidies to families, ensuring families can afford childcare resources if available. Also, adopting a better maternity leave policy is another way to address accessibility problems. By implementing a mandatory, longer, and 100% paid leave policy, the US could provide very needed financial assistance for families without access to childcare. A better maternity leave policy can also have health benefits, as it promotes a healthier work-life balance, increased parental bonding, and ultimately, a more prosperous society. So childcare is a very pressing issue in America. However, the prison system is another policy impediment that contributes to financial instability. So with that, I will pass it on to Quin.
Thank you, Matthew. I will now speak about the role of the criminal justice system in perpetuating financial insecurity. In the United States, the incarceration rate is staggering, with over 1.2 million people behind bars since 2022. But what happens when these people re-enter society? What challenges do they face? The fact is, individuals with a criminal record are 50% less likely to gain employment upon release. This not only affects them, but also their families, communities, and society as a whole, because it promotes a cycle of poverty, making it incredibly challenging for these individuals to become productive members of society once again, because of a lack of available employment. The current approach of our prison system makes this much worse by focusing on punishment rather than rehabilitation as well. But there is hope. We can learn from other countries that have adopted a more rehabilitative approach to incarceration. Take Norway, for example, where prisons resemble mini communities focused on trust and rehabilitation rather than punishment. There, the emphasis is on preparing individuals for reintegration into society. resulting in a remarkably low recidivism rate of only 20% compared to America's 76%. Germany offers another example. By prioritizing rehabilitation over imprisonment, Germany has seen positive social outcomes. Their prisons are designed to resemble living spaces rather than cages, emphasizing the humanity of those incarcerated, which helps to make the shift from prison back into society more natural. So what can we do to break the cycle of poverty perpetuated by our current prison system? We must shift our focus from punishment to rehabilitation by providing inmates with opportunities for education in order to get better jobs outside of prison, and by providing inmates with ways to expunge their record without paying lots of money. These changes in our current system could provoke much needed change that helps to break down the cycle of poverty that we currently face. In conclusion, the time for change is now. We cannot afford to ignore the devastating impact of our current punitive system on financial insecurity and poverty. By embracing a rehabilitative approach to incarceration and learning from the successes of other countries, we can create a more just and equitable society for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Quin. To address economic inequality in America, we must first address the inequalities found in the legal tax system. To start, government revenue is collected through three different methods. The most problematic of these is regressive taxation, infamous for its burden on America's lower class. Simply put, a regressive tax is a flat dollar amount taken from citizens. It places a larger financial burden on the lower class since the flat dollar amount accounts for a larger percentage of their annual income. In theory, regressive taxation sounds fair, as the amount taken from citizens is undiscriminatorily equal. But the disconnect in practice lies exactly in this fact, as America has a large wealth scale, and it is simply unfair that the lower class are taking on the same burden as higher earners. Property tax is the most common form of regressive taxation. For instance, on a street of identical homes, one neighbor makes $95,000 a year, while another makes $175,000 yearly. Tax jurisdiction lines do not consider this immense pay gap, and both neighbors are taxed at a flat rate of $13,000 annually. For one neighbor, that number equates to 14% of their income, but to the other, it rings in at less than 1%. Due to this, property tax confines low-income earners into lower-income areas as they cannot pay these insensitive rates. By forcing these low-income workers to seek housing in areas with low property taxes, regressive taxing works to create lower-income neighborhoods, which are proven to have more than double the rate of violent victimization as persons in high-income households, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. Families forced to live in areas where municipality tax is lower are inevitably subject to substandard education systems. In fact, less than 30% of students in the bottom quarter of income enroll in a four-year college or university. Among that group, less than 50% graduate, according to Albert DeParle, a researcher at the University of Southern California. This creates a pattern where the children of families living in low-income areas are forced to embark upon careers in low-paying jobs, thus necessitating them to live in areas with low property values, which creates a cycle of poverty that is difficult for them to break. When examined further, regressive taxation can potentially affect the economy as a whole negatively. By forcing workers into low-income neighborhoods, government revenue decreases in the long term, as those with lower incomes may struggle to keep up with their tax obligations, leading to potential tax evasion or avoidance. Significant reforms must be implemented to close the wealth gap and improve the lives of the lower class. The most popular option is a progressive tax system, where individuals are taxed at higher rates as their income increases. This ensures that those with higher income contribute a larger portion of their earnings to taxes, helping to redistribute wealth and promote economic fairness. The financial spectrum in America ranges from those who cannot afford basic necessities to billionaires who compile fortunes. In fact, adding as little as a 5% tax on the world's richest individuals could bring in $1.7 trillion, enough to lift 2 billion people out of poverty, according to a 2024 Oxford University study. Progressive taxation implements this exact system and could significantly relieve pressure on the lower and middle class. Additionally, corporate tax reform is another solution to this issue, as corporate America is responsible for some of the world's most enormous fortunes, which lines thousands of people's pockets daily. It can only accomplish this through the government's leniency in the tax system. Amongst the 2017 tax cuts, corporate tax cuts were made, including a permanent cut in the corporate tax rate from 35 to 21%. The reduction of corporate tax rates resulted in more revenue for corporate America, but none of the earning gains from the 2017 corporate rate tax cuts accrued to the bottom 90% of the income distribution, and this group received just a small fraction of the overall economic rates, according to research done by the United Way. This instance alone shows that taxing companies is necessary in order for middle and low class earners to flourish. As Americans, we face social, economic, and legal impediments on our quest to financial stability. Through our research here at the Teen Think Tank Project, we spent weeks proposing reforms to some of the most prevalent hurdles such as childcare, prison reform, and so much more. Our research and reforms were summarized for you today at our webinar, and we hope that you guys as an audience enjoy listening to it today. But now we would like to take a brief moment to recognize all the professionals who volunteered their time and effort to speak to us regarding financial insecurity in their fields. At the Teen Think Tank Project, our journey wouldn't have been possible without the thought leaders who volunteer their time and efforts. From entrepreneurs to former Teen Think Tank Project members, these thought leaders led conversations around topics like financial stability, financial planning, as well as financial insecurity. Their expertise greatly contributed to our research, and we would like to thank them all in a brief presentation.
First, we would like to thank former cohort member Jeremy Semino for walking us through the process of the cohort and sharing valuable insights into his college admissions journey.
We would additionally like to thank Dr. Andrew Campbell for teaching us about character-based leadership. His emphasis on listening, resilience, and embracing failure greatly helps us in developing our role as leaders.
We would also like to thank Connie Whitman for evaluating our communication styles and setting us up effectively to communicate with our cohort members.
Thank you to Mary Pasquarella from Prentice Financial Planning for sharing her expertise on financial literacy and wealth accumulation. Her insights on the importance of investing and compound interest were very beneficial to the economic cohort.
Next, we would like to thank Chandra Bozelko for assisting us in sharing our research and educating us about media circulation. She helped us think about the next step beyond our research paper and delving into strategies to gain publicity and expand its reach.
Next, we would like to thank Derek Minnow-Bloom for sharing his experience with food and housing justice issues. His exploration of intersectionality and community engagement emphasized the importance of involving community members in his project and highlighted the essential role of collaboration and inclusivity in addressing pressing social issues.
We would also like to thank previous cohort member Chase Craig for providing insights about his own project, which greatly assisted us in developing our own.
Thank you to Dr. Ashley England for using her experience in the United Way organization to provide feedback for our papers, as well as personal anecdotes for us to include.
Thank you, Matthew Desmond, for jumpstarting our thoughts on financial instability in America through your novel, Evicted. His in-depth exploration of the struggles faced by individuals dealing with housing insecurity introduced us to the complexities of poverty in our society today.
Finally, thank you to Atia Hack-Russell for using her expertise as a former Teen Think Tank member to give us feedback on our papers. As a researcher, her collegiate research experience allowed me to take my work to the next level. Again, our research would not have been possible without the time and effort from these speakers and presenters, and we felt it was necessary to commemorate their efforts today.
Thank you, Mahi and Matthew. We're now going to jump into our question and answer section of our evening. So Harsha and Lily will answer the first question. Are Asians more or less economically and educationally secure than whites?
From a social aspect, I would say it really does depend because in many areas such as the Bay Area in California and maybe even New Jersey, which is where I live, Asians are very lucky to benefit from the same economic and educational opportunities that white people also have. But in other areas, in America and both throughout the world, they still suffer from, financial instability due to their race.
kind of to also add on to that, Asian Americans as a whole are currently America's most diverse in terms of diverse group in terms of inequality. There's a 77% difference among Asian Americans from the highest income earners to the lowest income earners. You have Indian Americans as the highest income earners currently in the country with an average salary of an estimated 120K. But you also have many Asian American groups that sit at some of the lower levels of income groups. As a whole, yes, Asian Americans are economically performing quite well. But when you break that down into individual groups, and as Lily mentioned, geographic sections, you can see a steady inequality among Asian Americans as well. So that handles the economic part.
Great, thank you both. Diego, the next question is for you. Can you tell us how this experience with the Teen Think Tank project differed from your traditional school-based projects and classes?
Yeah, personally, I would say that the freedom and like kind of the liberty of study with this group is different than my school environment because in most of my classes, it's kind of the assignments are directed on one specific thing. With this, we kind of had the freedom to research what we wanted as long as we knew how to. And I don't know, I think it just taught me a lot more about doing things myself and not having it set up for me, you know, because there was like barely any like skeleton to the rough draft or anything like that. Kind of basically had to go in it by yourself.
Great, thank you. Matthew, the next question is for you. Are there any companies or organizations that offer childcare at their expense or for low cost for their employees? And if so, has it been seen as a benefit for the employer?
I do not know any like specific companies, but I do believe some offer childcare. But I think the problem with that is that they're usually only offered in these higher paying jobs. So I'm not too sure about the data, but I think they are offered in these higher paying jobs, and that kind of hurts these people in poverty. And but like I'm sure in this in that demographic who do have access to it, they probably will benefit from the childcare.
Great, thanks. Quinn, the next question is for you. Do you think there is any hope in solving the poverty issue?
So obviously a big question and a big issue as we've just done a giant presentation of the issue, but I think it's been built up over many years as we've all illustrated. But if power is in the hands of the right people, the right lawmakers who have the right data, I think there is hope in solving it, but you can't guarantee it.
Thank you. Mahi, can you tell us what your favorite experience as a member of the research cohort was?
I think I personally had so many takeaways from being a part of the Teen Think Tank project, but as far as being a member, I think getting to interact with so many different teenagers was really special. As you probably heard earlier, we're located all over the country, and getting to collaborate with them over like really substantial research was definitely a unique experience for me.
Fantastic. Keely, can you tell us what your favorite part of the whole project was?
My favorite part was working with so many different people because they all brought different mindsets and ideas to topics that I hadn't really considered before. And I feel like it made my mindset just much more acceptable to new outlooks on the problems we deal with as a society.
Fantastic. Great. Harsha, can you tell us what are some ways in which we can ensure that policy favors towards workers that aren't rolled back by lobbying and or later administrations?
Sure. So a major thing that I can see that works is codifying laws, of course. Once it's put down as something solid, something that cannot be changed through like voting methods by Congress in general. That's one method that could be put forward. Yeah, I'm sure the legal cohort has a few more points they could add as well to this, considering they have done the research on this exact point.
Any of our legal SMEs want to jump in?
Through my research, I actually found that allowing workers to be empowered and encouraged to use their voice in the workplace was a potential solution to preventing the policies rolling back into administration. So this can be done by increasing worker protection laws.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you to our guests who submitted questions. I'm now going to hand it back over to Matt for our academic awards and scholarship presentation.
Team, thank you very much. Fantastic job. Appreciate all the hard work. Appreciate our audience. Question and answer period is always one of our favorite parts of the presentation because it gives us the opportunity to see the change agent in action. We've certainly done a lot of preparation to get to this point, but it is not your standard research project where we simply look at one particular question or one particular issue and focus on that particular element. We spend 36 hours together looking at a number of questions and a number of topics. And I think the interaction that you've seen here today is indicative of the kind of work that this team does. So team, thank you very much. And again, thank you to all of our participants for their questions. Sorry we couldn't get to everything, but speaking from experience, if given a untimed platform, this group can certainly spend a good amount of time chatting about ideas and answering questions on a passion they are particularly on a question they're particularly passionate about. So anytime you get high potential teens together, you will be hard pressed to have them leave the room or leave the gathering without providing them some quantifiable takeaway. We pride ourselves in the fact that we are a program that looks to create intangible benefits. We try to give our research associates lifelong, long tail experiences that they will utilize in future endeavors. But these are your prototypical high achievers. These are your prototypical smart kids. We know what they do inside the classroom. We know what they do when it comes to quantifying their work. So we'd be remiss in not handing out a few awards to some of the cohort members that stood above and beyond. And when you stand above and beyond a group whose average GPA is 3.98 and 100% college acceptance rate, you know you're doing something special, because those are very high standards and a very high bar. And this group, to an individual, exceeds all of the standards and thresholds that are before them. But in looking at a few of the awards that we hand out, the first, which is a very difficult metric to achieve, it is our honors program. Those individuals who accumulate more than 96.1% of all available points from assignments, meetings, and journal entries graduate our program with honors. That 96.1 is very important because that is a particularly high standard that takes almost perfection to achieve. I believe we have two individuals who just missed out on graduating our program with honors, and maybe they were late or missed one meeting and failed to tackle some type of assignment or journal entry. So there's not a lot of room for error. But we did have three individuals who met that standard. Harsha Ahmed, Lily Zhu, and James Parlee performed exceptionally from day 1 to day 24, and we commend them with the designation of honor program recipients. It is probably no surprise then that James, Harsha, and Lily were the recipients of our Research Associate of the Month awards for January, February, and March. And it's a recognition that we bestow upon the Research Associate that goes above and beyond. And going above and beyond in this group, as I mentioned, is there's something to be said about that, because folks bring their A game every day, twice a week for 90 minutes per meeting. It is nonstop. We dive in, we jump into breakout sessions, discussions, presentations, thought leader meetings, and it is a Socratic method. These research associates are put on the spot. They're asked to lead discussions. They're asked to participate in discussions. They're asked to present material. They're asked to revise and provide insight on their colleagues' materials. And the fact that any of them can stand out is a testament to all of them and their tremendous work ethic. So not only congratulations to James, Harsha, and Lily, but congratulations to all of the research associates who created the environment that gave their colleagues the motivation and incentive to thrive. In addition to our monthly awards, we have created a Outstanding Research Associate award. It's a scholarship. It's a $500 cash scholarship that goes to the individual who embodies the ethos of the Teen Think Tank Project. And while each of these individuals certainly qualifies for it, there is a particular process and an application process and an interview process that goes into selecting our finalists and therefore selecting our winner. But it is a very difficult process. When asked who the cohort thought should receive this particular award, the responses were varied. Mahi is most worthy of the cohort's Outstanding Research Associate. Despite the fact that she's only a freshman, she's been detailed in her work and provided many great inputs from the cohort's papers. The cohort really responded well to Mahi's insights and Mahi's contributions to our work product in the form of research. Lily was identified as most deserving of this award. Her effort, time and time again, was identified as something that allowed her to stand out and accept a leadership role. And her cohort members felt like she never failed them. She was there to provide them with leadership, whether she knew it or not, or whether they needed it or not. Harsha, from day one, impressed his colleagues with leadership and intelligence, and his contributions to the meetings were clearly noticed by his colleagues. We're not done. We're not done. James His colleagues identified him as being worthy of the Most Outstanding Research Associate Award. He, time and time again, goes above and beyond what was required. And finally, Keely. Her colleagues thought that from the very beginning, she was actively engaged and drove conversation and the spirit of the cohort. These are their words. We asked them who among you stood out, and they came back with 50% of the cohort is worthy of being named the most outstanding research associate, which is absolutely amazing. And I would venture to say the other 50% weren't named because I only asked them to provide the name of one cohort member. So their selection process was very, very limited. But with that said, we needed to select 2 finalists, and those individuals were Harsha Ahmed and James Parlee. And these individuals stand out, and they are worthy finalists. They are worthy recipients of this award. Harsha had a academic acumen and intelligence and the ability to articulate in a way that few other high school students that I've worked with have been able to do. I think it was very clear from day one that he had the ability to establish himself as a leader. But what's even more impressive than that is that he continued to develop. He continued to find his place in the cohort. It's very easy for high potential, high achieving students to step in and determine that their voice is the strongest, therefore they can lead any aspect. But a true leader is able to take the temperature and understand the values of the group and adjust accordingly. And Harsha was able to do that flawlessly. And then James came to us with a very robust and well-rounded resume, academically, personally, socially. But despite the fact that he had such a wide array of skills, he came to this program with one specific goal. And that was to find out how he can have the greatest impact for good, how he can be a change agent and better himself so he can help better others. And those are 2 sides of the same coin when you're looking at high potential teens, when you're looking at change agents. So it's an impossible task. Luckily, it's not a task that I had to complete. If I was asked to choose which of our research associates deserved $500, Teen Think Tank Project would go out of business because I would quite literally give each of them this award. Therefore, we bring in a independent, objective participant of our team to evaluate the applicants and choose our winner. And this semester, this session, that task, that unenviable task, went to Bernadette Sheehan, who is front and center when it comes to the public face and marketing and student relations within our organization. And every year every session she threatens to quit if I make her do this again. Luckily, she held on for this one because it was very difficult. But with that said, and without further ado, this session's Most Outstanding Scholarship Award winner goes to James Parlee. Unfortunately, James had a family issue that kept him away from this presentation, but he did prepare a few words that he would like to share.
Don't worry, I'll do my best to keep this short and sweet, but let me get this out of the way first. I am just as shocked as you are that Harsha didn't win. That said, I will do my best to live up to what it means to be an agent of change in our society. Next, I don't think I'll ever be able to say these words enough to this particular group of people, but thank you. Thank you so very much to my fellow researchers, thought leaders, research assistants, guest speakers, and research coordinator. This experience has been more than a blessing. Through the late night cancellations, the last minute submissions, and horrible network bandwidth problems, you guys have been through it all with me. A special shout out goes to my subject matter expert group, which included Harsha and Keely, who I've made a special bond with. Whether it be making a shared Spotify playlist with Keely or wearing fun sunglasses in a breakout room with Harsha, there wasn't a dull moment shared between the three of us. Of course, another special shout out to Matt and Erica. Your late night above and beyond efforts don't go unnoticed. Finally, thank you all for being here to experience this launch party with us. Without anybody to share our work with, our research loses some of its meaning. We hope that you take what you learned this evening and keep it in the back of your mind always. That's it. Thank you all so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Take care.
So that right there is one of the two reasons that I do this. That right there is one of the two reasons that I founded the Teen Think Tank Project. It is to create a platform that not only empowers these high potential teens, but gives them the opportunity to create the relationships and the pride in their work that they're able to create when working not only with educators, not only with thought leaders, not only with subject matter experts, but with other teens. As long as the feedback keeps coming that this program gives them the platform to do so, we'll keep offering research cohorts for these high potential students. The second reason we keep doing this and why we are motivated to keep offering programs to these teens is because I've read somewhere recently that this Congress, the current session of Congress, is on track to be the least productive Congress in the history of America going back to the Great Depression. The least productive legislative body since the Great Depression. That's not a political statement, that's a math problem. There are a lot of problems. My generation created a significant amount of those problems. The generation before us created the overwhelming majority of those problems, or at least perpetuated those problems. And the people from those generations who are now in positions to create those solutions are not doing it. Therefore, it is in our best interest. It is in my best interest as a middle-aging man in America to invest in the next generation that will be solving these problems. And these 10 young leaders, these 10 change agents are the individuals who will be in that position. So as long as they're willing and ready to solve the problems that we are throwing at them, it's the least that I can do. It's the least that this program can do. We are at 8:30. That is 90 minutes of your evening that you've dedicated to this cause, that you've dedicated to this program. We hope that you have enjoyed it. I am going to turn it over to Harsha Ahmed for the final words and the cohorts sign off. Harsha, for the last time as a cohort, I hand it over to you.
Sure, thank you, Matt. And first of all, thank you so much for being over here, everyone, and congratulations to James, of course. I feel like the best way to close this off is by answering the one question that someone put up. Has his research inspired any of you to pursue these topics further? Because that kind of, shows what we're going to do. Something practical, something to show how we're going to keep pushing forward to make the changes that Matt has mentioned. And I feel like certainly, yes, we're all going to go ahead and we're all going to make the changes that we need. This cohort has taught us all so much, whether it just be numbers about something or in-depth research or just research and communication skills in general. We've all learned something, and we're all taking away something from this cohort that we can use later on practically in our lives. This cohort started off as 12 of us just joining a room randomly one evening, one Zoom call way back in January, without knowing anyone else. And it's kind of bloomed from just that one meeting to 3 months later, all of us sitting here today in one consolidated meeting, presenting the work that we have worked so hard on, the papers that we worked so hard on. So yeah, we're certainly going to use these skills in the future, work with people, and get the changes that Matt has mentioned to be done. That's pretty much it from my side. And yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed the webinar. I hope you've all taken away something from this. We certainly have, and we've had a lot of fun. Yep, that's pretty much it. Good night, everyone.